Hello，大家好，我是 ISC 国际学生中心的 Julia。今天我们欢迎来到 Animix 前哨站的第二堂 Master Class 的部分。那我们今天非常欢迎Mr. Cameron 将大家带来一个就是关于游戏设计相关的一些资讯。那其中在他今天的 Master Class 里面也会为大家带来一些就是游戏准备的一些 tips 这样子。那我们接下来就是非常欢迎 Mr. Cameron 来为大家做今天的一些介绍。那比赛相关的资讯都非常欢迎大家可以到我们的 ISC 国际学生中心的官网上参照就是比赛的一些规定这样子。Okay, so Cameron, okay, I just finished the introduction, so I hand over to you.
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Cameron. I'm going to be teaching 3D games art, introduction to visual scripting, and games development fundamentals at the foundation year course at Teesside Uni, International Study Centre. What I'm going to be showing you today is essentially an overview of what we'll be covering and what we'll be teaching, and how you can get involved and learn ultimately how to design video games and understand every part of what is involved in designing a video game. So, like I said myself, introduction to visual scripting, introduction to games production, and 3D modeling. Each of those aspects are a core feature in games design, because ultimately what you're doing is you're creating the things you see on screen. So if you've played a video game, or you're moving a character around a screen, or a car, or some object that you see, that thing has been designed by a team of people specifically for that asset. So that's what I'll essentially be covering. My colleague Holly, who's absolutely fantastic, very skilled concept art tutor. She's going to be covering introduction to drawing, creativity and design, and introduction to 2D digital art. Like that's sort of the beforehand step to what I'll be teaching. So she'll be covering all of the conceptually designed work, all of the the designing of those objects that I've just spoke about. If you want to design a car or a prop for your game, or a character or some fantastic environment or world, anything you can imagine, something that's rooted in, whether it's in reality or you've completely made it up. Holly will walk you through how to sort of visualize those things. So essentially, the course is a foundation year course. We'll cover everything I've just said prior. And then what I'll go through next is how it sort of leads on to a course at the university. What we're trying to do is instill a sense of confidence and understanding in how to design and make video games, whether it's from the game itself to all of the assets involved, all the props, all some visual scripting, games design, understanding how all these parts fit together. And it'll be really exciting because ultimately it's a new course at the university. So potentially the people on this call, if they join, they'll be part of something brand new, and they'll be able to set a sort of a new standard within the university on what we cover at a foundational level. Yeah, if you like playing video games and you think you're passionate about video games, this is definitely that course for you. I think just a little bit about my experience and my sort of history with this course and this industry. Obviously, I played video games for years. Some of the video games that I used to play had a creative element to it where you could actually design levels and maps. So things like Halo 3, Far Cry, that sort of thing, you could create maps, and that sort of, I started to make maps in those games and things like that, and then that sort of gave me a very brief, albeit naive, overview of how to make a game, if you will. And then that sort of, ignited some
Hi.
passion.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Cameron, to interrupt. Would you mind to double click the subtitle function again? Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I think it said when I initially started presenting, it said that they were too quiet, but oh, there we go, fantastic, it's working. Yeah, so the way I sort of started with this was I went from playing video games to wanting to understand how video games are made. Because when you look at a video game, it's almost like watching a film. You don't necessarily understand what goes on in the background. This course gives you an overview of what goes on in the background and how all those pieces fit together to make a video game ultimately. Yeah, like I said, we'll teach you the foundational elements of what it takes to make a game and tell entertaining stories. A lot of what we're going to teach is about creating a narrative or designing a story in a way, because what Holly will teach on the concept art modules, what I'll teach on the 3D design and games development modules, you go in from start to finish in the sense that you've designed something, a character or a prop or an environment that has a story. You want to make it seem, I don't want to say realistic, because you might design something that's totally unrealistic, but you want it to seem functional, if that makes sense. You want it to, it needs to be logical, and it has to have a story. Why is that character in this world, or why those trees or those environmental assets look the way they look, or whatever. Any game you've ever played, whether it's popular games now like Fortnite, Call of Duty, Elder Scrolls games, or whatever. Everything in that game has a story. It's all how it has some narrative behind it, whereby someone has taken something from their imagination, and then they've created this fantastic, exciting world ultimately. Like I've just said there, lots of elements come together to make a video game. So each one of these are the roles you might get in a game design team. And what we're going to try and do, or we will do, is touch on each one of these roles on how they sort of all work together to create this video game or animation sequence or visual effects sequence or whatever. You've got engine programmer, gameplay programmer, visual effects artist, sound designer, games tester, that sort of thing. Each of these roles are the course has been written in such a way that will cover aspects of each role. So you will fundamentally understand when you're playing a video game, or after you've studied on this course, you'll go back and play a video game and you'll go, I understand how that was made or how that was designed ultimately. Which I think is really cool, because I think if you have a fundamental understanding of something from the beginning or the behind the scenes, you have more of an appreciation for it. What I'll do now is I'll tell you about what we're going to focus on, what I'm going to focus on. So like I said, Holly is going to cover concept art and introduction to drawing. It doesn't necessarily have to be thought of as, assume you can't draw, that sort of thing. Come into it completely naive, and Holly will build you up. Holly will build your skills from the ground up. Give you an introduction to the fundamentals of drawing and design, and how to think creatively, and how to come up with an idea from start to finish, and then how to be confident with translating that idea onto paper or into a digital medium like Photoshop, or some other piece of digital drawing software. And what I'll ultimately be covering is 3D modeling. So my background actually comes from a slightly different industry, which I think is quite cool in the sense that I can sort of apply my thinking differently. Obviously, I studied games design, and then I went to work in the industry as a 3D artist at it was like an engineering company and a design company. So we used to make a lot of virtual reality sort of training events. So things like modeling oil rigs, or modeling refineries, or pieces of equipment that you might get in an oil refinery, and that sort of thing. Right down to that very small detail. And I also come from an architectural background. So what you see here is a piece of work I did, 3D model the inside of a room for a client who has a furniture company. But essentially what you're seeing here is, this just looks like a photograph potentially, but each aspect is being modeled from scratch. You know, the arm, the chairs, the coffee table, the carpet, the plants, the light, everything's been sort of designed and modeled using this software that you will be using. So the goal would potentially be to you learn how to make assets like this, and then you go on to the course at Teesside Uni itself, you know, and you perfect those skills and refine them, and then you achieve, you know, really high quality work because you have a foundational understanding. So this is an example of a virtual reality piece of work that I did in my previous company of an industrial setting. But again, all digital, everything, all the assets have been made from scratch using the software that you will learn. You know, but although the application of this piece is different, it's still following a video game design process. It's still using a video game engine, that sort of thing. These are just some more you know, pieces of work I did over the last few years. Some product design, some sort of 3D conceptual art of a robot, and then a room interior. But like I was saying before, everything has a story. You know, if you take, for example, the robot picture, I made it in such a way where it was the robot potentially is running away from something. Sorry, the subtitles have gone off again. Let me just double check. They're on. Hello, is that working now? Yeah, cool. You know, when I designed this piece, the robot one, I imagined that the robot was running away from something, and it was trying to hide itself using this cloth on its head or this rag, and it doesn't necessarily have to wear it because it's a robot, but it thinks it's human, or it thinks it has this level of intelligence where it thinks it has to cover its head. And I think having the confidence to have a story behind your work and then passionately talk through what it means is something that Holly and I will try and instill on the students, which I think is key, because obviously you need to be able to talk about your work. You need to be able to tell people what your work is, because having a nice visual is great, but then being able to talk passionately about it is the next step. So what I'll be covering is 3D modeling. So here you've got two screenshots from the software we'll learn. The top one is 3ds Max. So essentially what you see in there is a model of a car in process. So the way it works is you might get a side-on view of the car, a front view and a top-down, etc. And you essentially draw these planes, these flat 3D planes, to fit the shape of the car, or, you know, whether it's a car or a weapon in a game or a prop. You know, it could be something as simple as a rock or a barrel. You still sort of you extrude it out of thin air. Ultimately, it didn't exist before you modeled it, which I think is something that really someone's once said to me when I first started in my career. When you're 3D modeling, the thing you made didn't exist before. You've just sort of extruded it and, you know, digitally carved it out of thin air. So the idea of creating something that never existed before is quite unique, and I think quite inspiring. And then eventually you'll take that asset and you'll put it into a video game engine, and you'll make it do things. You'll animate it. You'll light it. You'll make it interact with other pieces. And this is how this video game process sort of fits together. The next piece of software we'll learn is a thing called Substance Painter. So how you actually texture those assets. So the top picture of the car is a 3D model without any color on it, or it's just flat color. The software we'll learn is how to then add rust, how to add small detail. You know, how, if it's a car, how might you add like a splash of water or some oil on the side, or, you know, scratches or something like that. You know, how do you differentiate between different textures on the car? How is the car painted? Is it painted with a glossy paint, or is it painted with a matte texture? That sort of thing. And we'll go through all of that. We'll show you how to you know, look at the world around you ultimately, and how does light interact with objects, and how do you recreate that in this 3D software. The next piece I'll be covering is visual scripting and games design fundamentals, or games development, sorry, using Unity, which is a 3D game engine. So if you imagine you've got all of your 3D models that we've taught you how to make, which is fantastic. But we now want to make them do things. We want to animate them, or we want to we want to put a bit of programming and scripting on top of them and make them interact with other objects. So the examples you can see on screen, it's just level design in Unity. So you can sort of see how you might create a shape or a wall, or that could be a cliff in a 3D environment. I'm not sure, whatever you interpret that as is fine, because it's ultimately using your imagination. But that is how you might create a 3D object in a virtual space. And then what you've got underneath is a sort of an overview of how we then make those objects interact with each other. You've got Unity's visual scripting tool. So let's say, for example, you have a ball. You've modeled a ball that's just a sphere, and you want to make that ball roll. And when it hits something, you want the ball to maybe burst, or you want the ball to bounce and roll away. You might define that ball as a dynamic object that you can then overlay sort of this interaction onto. So you might say, when this ball hits this object, it should do this thing. It's kind of like, if it does this, then do that type of thing. That's sort of the way I understand it. And all of the sort of boxes and the arrows you see on the image below is how you do that. So what we'll do is we'll walk you through how to design an asset conceptually through Holly's work, how to then make the asset through 3D modeling, and then we'll go through how to then make that object do things in the game. How to make it come to life ultimately. Another part of the course we'll touch on is animation. So how you then make objects that you've modeled move. So what I've tried to do here is show you how an object is animated in 3D software. So I don't know if you've ever seen like a flip book where you might draw a different image on each page, and then you flick through it with your fingers, and it sort of moves over time because each page is a different frame. It essentially works the same way with 3D software. You might move an object slightly, like you can see the ball is rotating, and then you'll set a keyframe. So that's one page of the flip book analogy, and then you'll move it along, and then you'll move it slightly differently, and then you'll move it slightly differently, and so on. And then what you do is you move along the timeline. So the timeline at the bottom is essentially like flipping through that book. And that's how you then bring things to life. And then you can take that animation out of this software and put it into a different piece of software, and then again combine it with the games development aspect, and you get really exciting and dynamic things going on. If you've ever played, obviously many of you will have played video games. All of the movement in that scene, or any character that does anything or moves around or whatever, has all been animated by someone very skilled in character animation or environment animation, that sort of thing. Nature, trees moving in the wind, or bushes blowing, or particle effects, explosions, that sort of thing. It all follows to a degree the same sort of fundamental keyframe, step-by-step process. So essentially, we give you an overview of the different parts of game making. I've just noticed my subtitles went off again. Apologies. Holly and I will use our knowledge and our understanding of those processes to then teach you how to do those things. What I think is key is that we get across to you an understanding of how things are made from scratch. And by that, I mean what you're seeing on the screen here. So this 3D environment of a restaurant, or this animation of a boy pulling a trolley along the street. How do those things work, and how can you understand them through making, which is what we'll do. And then I think it's crucial that you have an appreciation for how those things are made, because then you'll be more passionate about your own work. And then again, like I said, when you go back and play a video game, or you watch a film, or you see a 3D CGI sequence in a movie, you'll understand and you'll go, I understand how that was made, or I understand how they've animated that in that video game, or how they've 3D modeled that asset, which I think is really cool. So yeah, this is a pathway course to Teesside University. So everything we cover will allow you to then go on and study at Teesside University. There's certain courses at the university that everything we cover in our modules will allow you to then progress to a degree at the university, which then ultimately the goal would be to then prepare you for a career in this industry, because all of the courses at Teesside Uni are sort of written alongside industry people. So you are essentially learning how to do it properly in the job once you go. So you'll be prepared for things like how to follow a project timeline, how to work in a team, that sort of thing, how to understand deadlines, or how to to a degree there's a course you can study where you go through things like budgets and indie game development and the business aspect of video game and animation design. So from our course, these are some of the degrees that you can go on to. These are all of the degrees you can go on to, apologies. 2D animation and stop motion, animation, concept art, games design, games development, and visual effects. The games design and games development and games art, don't be confused by them sounding similar. They're all fundamentally different. So games art is what I would teach, which is designing the 3D models and all of the things you see on screen, the visuals. Games design is sort of how you then take those things and put them together like a machine, every cog in the machine, how then to make that thing run. And then games development is more the the functionality side, the programming, how do you go from start? I want to make a game, so how do I do that start to finish? The modules we cover on the course: academic English skills, introduction to visual scripting, drawing, creativity and design, game production, 2D digital art, 3D modeling and animation. All of the modules in our course fit nicely with the degrees at Teesside University. So the goal would be that you go onto the course with a little bit of an edge. So let's say there are people on that course who've never done this before. You have already got an advantage on those people, to excel, because you have an understanding of how the things that they're teaching work. You'll get shown a module. If you're doing games art, you'll get shown how to design a 3D model. You'll already have that previous understanding of how 3D models are made. And the way this course is written, we want to show you the best. We don't want to keep anything from you. I'm going to try my absolute best to show you, how to create models, to that degree level. Industry standard 3D models and video game development and that sort of thing, because why not? You should be shown how to be the best. And you want to excel, you want to stand out, and you want to be really successful in your career. You want to get a fantastic job ultimately. So some careers in animation. I'll not go through all this because it's quite wordy, but you've got animator, concept artist, creative director, art director, and compositor. Animator, concept artist are more sort of making and designing the actual animation sequences. Creative director and art director are more of a managerial producer role, project management, leading a team of people, signing off on things and how things are done, and you have sort of the final say ultimately based on what the production company wants, or the client, or whoever it is you're working for. Careers in games programming. Again, I'll not go through all this, but you've got games designer, level designer, software engineer, engine programmer, and user interface designer. What I teach, the level of scripting and programming I'll teach is more visual scripting. So clicking and dragging things into boxes, and this object has to interact with this object. It's not necessarily programming to a level of that of a software engineer, someone who would just sit and write code for hours on end. It's not that think of it more as drag and drop sort of scripts and how things function together. So at the university, these are some of the companies that we have students have went on to work for or collaborated with to a degree with the university. So obviously Rockstar in the top right is a fantastic one to obviously make Grand Theft Auto. Really big successful video games company. But all of that sort of happens because we try and align the course to industry standards. Sorry, I'm saying try. They are aligned to industry standards. So when you go into the industry, you're already prepared. So does anyone have any questions so far or anything? And then I'll go on to the competition piece. Nothing? Fantastic. So this is the cool part now. What we've put together is a competition for students to win a scholarship at the university based on a games design or a VFX animation idea. What we want you to put together is an idea or tell us about an idea based on the theme Your Move. So we will send out a brief after this call, which explains in more detail, but I'll go through the whole thing as best as I can now. Essentially, what we've done is we want you to tell us about a game or a video game idea you have, or an animation idea for a film or something like that. To show us how you think and how you would approach a brief. As simple as Your Move. It could be tell us about a video game. Just write it down or do a quick sketch or something like that. So the prize for the competition, a trip to the UK to join the Animex Festival. So Animex is a fantastic festival at Teesside Uni where people from the industry come together, from film, video games, animation, everything you can think of in terms of what we teach. People from those industries come to the university and talk about projects or talk about the creative process. You get to see some concept art, some behind the scenes footage of films, things that are works in progress, video games that are getting made, or artists will come and talk about their work. It's amazing. It's really inspiring. And it's a great way to see how people in the industry think, because a lot of the time, although their work is different, I found that their processes are quite similar, and they all have this really exciting, fiery creativity that I think is, again, really inspiring. So pitch us a game idea. Tell us about what you want to make. Get excited. Don't be shy. Ultimately, be as crazy as you want, or be as exciting as you want, and tell us about it might be a really simple game, or it might be a really complex game with really complex mechanics. So long as you can convey that effectively to us based on the submission criteria, which I'll go through shortly, then ultimately that's the best way to do it. We want an original idea. So although it might be something that's inspired by other things, try and be as original as you can. Don't try and recreate a video game that already exists. Ultimately, we want to see something different. If you want to stand out, ultimately, we want to see someone who can think originally and creatively, using their imagination, and make something exciting. Ultimately, all based on the theme of Your Move, which, albeit quite vague, is, I think, quite exciting because it could be anything. You could literally make or think of, design anything. Tell us the name and a bit about your idea. So if it's a video game, tell us the name of the video game. Show us how you've related it back to the original theme of Your Move. How does this video game or this animation sequence or whatever it is you want to design relate to the original theme? And show us your idea in detail. Try and break it down into as much detail as you possibly can. So what's the video game? How do you play the video game? Why are you making this video game or animation or whatever it might be? And where does the idea come from? What's inspired you? What are you referencing? So there's two submission types, which you'll get sent a document that covers them both. So there's an arts submission or a games design submission. So Holly, you'll get sent a video of what Holly put together, the visual arts submission, which is more of a, if you want to tell us about your idea, draw your idea. But for those who aren't necessarily as artistically strong, we want you to also show us how you might write down your game's idea, talk us through a logical process of how does that game function, what is the video game, or what's the idea behind it, how do characters interact with each other, are there any characters at all, that sort of thing. So for example, show us the way you play the video game. So you've got gameplay mechanics, user interface, mood boards. If you don't know what a mood board is, it's essentially an image made up of other images, so like a collage of ideas. So if it's a video game about space, or it's a video game set in a desert or something where it's really dry and sandy or something, I don't know, it could be anything. Put together images of different deserts and sand and rocks and colors and anything, any reference image that you can put together that would inspire someone to think about your environment that you're designing or the game that you're making. Just as a visual cue. Any technical specifications around the game. Again, how does the game function? What is the game? What are the core mechanics? In most video games, you have something called a gameplay loop. So a gameplay loop is essentially the fundamental gameplay mechanics, or the way you play that game, that kind of loops itself often through the game. So if you take, for example, Pokemon, the gameplay loop for Pokemon might be, you go out into the world, you encounter different Pokemon, you fight Pokemon, you level those Pokemon up, you go to a gym, fight other Pokemon trainers, and then you go back out and do the same thing. So it's this process of, almost like if you're playing a game where there's lots of dungeons or something like World of Warcraft or Diablo or whatever, you go out into the world, you go through dungeons, you find gear, you level up, and then you do the same thing. Talk us through that loop, that process of what's the fundamental gameplay loop in your idea. So this is just some examples of how you could potentially submit what it is that you're making. So just some really quick sketches, simple doodles. It doesn't have to be anything over the top. How does a character go from point A to point B? You see in the image on the right hand side that this is like someone jumping from different levels up, that sort of thing. Really simple, just showing arrows where they go. And this is it says one player animated. Player has to jump and move to other platforms. As simple as that. Tell us, how does the player move around the world? You've got level design types. Is it a linear level? Do you go from point A to point B? Or is it a branched end? So it could be something where you're walking through a cave or a spaceship or something, and I can go left or right or down the middle, and each has a different outcome. That sort of thing. A really quick sketch of a level. So if you're designing a game based on your move and you want to maybe say, I'm designing a game where the player can't move, literally there's something where they can't move. They have to just operate from the point that they're in and interact from a distance or something, So you've kind of flipped the brief and said, well, I'm not going to move my character. I'm going to make them stationary. And then I'm going to design, maybe the world around them moves or something like that. I don't know. So basically, what you can submit could be something really technical like this. So talk us through, do the characters have health? Do they have energy? Or what currency do they use? Or where are they in the world? Or how do they collide with other characters and that sort of thing? And, it can be as technical as this. And this stuff I find really exciting. What's the genre? What's inspired you? What are the player controls, game modes, that sort of thing? Take any video game you've had. Each one of those will have some design document behind it. These are two examples from video games in the past. So the one on the left is from Diablo. So it's essentially talking the team through how the game works. And there's a small diagram of a dungeon and how you might go from a village into the dungeon, and it has this like tiered level. And you work your way through those levels down, 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 and then back to the surface or something. It could be anything. The one on the right is from Grand Theft Auto. So it talks about the concept of a game called Race and Chase. So before it was Grand Theft Auto, it was Race and Chase. So something you could submit something as simple as a one-page document like this that talks you through like this does. The aim of Race and Chase is to produce a fun, addictive, and fast multiplayer car racing and crashing game which uses novel graphics method. So ultimately, all the game was designed to be was a multiplayer racing game, and then it sort of became this, this monster that's Grand Theft Auto now, this massive, massive game, that millions of people play, based on this one-page document that just sort of outlines in its most simple form the fundamental mechanics of the game. And it can be a graphical document as well. It can be nicely designed graphically, if that's sort of something you think would benefit, your idea. So the document is supported by some graphics. Again, core concept, main features, target platform, who is the game for, who are you designing the game for, the animation sequence, who is it for yourself, or is it for your family, or is it for your friends, or is it for everyone? Even if you might make a game for yourself, and there's nothing wrong with that, because ultimately you've had an idea and it's something you're excited by. Similar things, game genre guide. You've got like, is it an adventure game? Is it a shooter game, or a platform, or a simulation game like a racing game, or whatever. Just be as creative and excited as you can about the idea, and just write it down. You could scribble on some paper an idea and totally handwritten draw, no drawings at all. Just say, I want to make a game where you push a button and it does this, or I want to make a game where the player has to do X, Y, and Z. And that is equally as valuable as an arts submission. Consider locations and key events. Highlight what makes the project unique. Again, we want something unique and creative, and we want people to use their imagination. And don't be shy. Be as crazy and as wild as you want, and that's something me and Holly really want to try and draw out of people. The confidence to think differently and be creative, and be a bit different with their work, because we don't want people to sort of keep recreating the same thing, or look at video games and say, I'm going to make another Grand Theft Auto game or something, which is cool, and you can do that. But I think what really stands out and what's really valuable, not only for yourself but for everyone else, is if you create something unique. So based on the arts submission and the games design submission, we want you to pick the one that you think will be the best way to convey your idea. If you're an artist, then draw everything down, create some fantastic drawings, some big pictures, and talk us about what you're designing. Or do the games design approach and be really technical and really logical in your thinking, and be quite concise with how you relay that information back to us. We want something new, creative, and fun. Ultimately, we want you to have fun. We want you to make this game idea fun, fun for yourself and fun for everyone else. Ultimately, because that's what the course is all about. We're teaching you how to make video games, which are cool, and ultimately, we want to try and get that excitement across in the course. And we want you to excite us as well. We want you to we want to be excited by looking at your work, because it's cool for us. So the theme is your move. But again, we'll send a brief out after this which explains in more detail how you submit your idea for the competition. That's it. I hope that was all right. And if you've got any questions, let me know.
Hey, thank
Hi,
you very much. Hi, thank you very much for your master class. It's
no problem.
wonderful. And yeah, and the information I think is very sufficient for the students who are going to attend this competition.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, thank
excellent.
you very
Thank you.
much. OK，今天非常谢谢大家的来参加这一堂 Master Class 的课程。那关于比赛详情的部分，请大家可以参阅我们 ISC 国际学生中心的官网。那也非常欢迎大家就是多踊跃报名参加这次的比赛。OK，thank you very much。
Thank you.